Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Check. Today, Paul is talking with board-certified family physician Dr. Joseph Mercola. Dr. Mercola is best known as the founder of health information website Mercola.com. He is an osteopathic physician, a fellow of the American College of Nutrition, and the author of many best-selling books. In 2009, he was named the top ultimate wellness game changer by the Huffington Post.
Hi, I know you're all familiar with Dr. Mercola and know that he's a true warrior spirit when it comes to informing people about how to protect themselves and stay healthy. In this podcast, Dr. Mercola and I get deep into such key issues as why Google is a very dangerous stealth influence on your life and what you can do about it, why we need to be careful with large corporations, the dangers of EMF exposure, and Dr. Mercola's new book on the topic, in which he offers you a free chapter. The benefits of time-restricted eating, and some of Dr. Mercola's favorite supplements and health tips. There's a lot of eye-opening information being shared in this interview, and I hope you enjoy being better informed so you can live well with me in 4D. Enjoy. All right, welcome to Living 4D with Paul Check, everybody. I have got a very famous guest you'll most certainly all know of, and that's Dr. Mercola. And Dr. Mercola, thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Paul.
It's always a pleasure. Yeah, and thank you. And so I just would like to say for everybody listening, I've been, aware of Dr. Mercola's work for a very long time, back in around 2000 when I was doing all the research to write my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. Dr. Mercola's site was one of the places I went to find information on things like toxicity and foods and packaging and all sorts of things that he was sharing about back then. Dr. Mercola, when did you first put your site up?
Before Google put theirs up. So 1997.
Wow. Yeah. So you've been around. You're probably, I don't think there was really anybody out there sharing.
There were definitely people out there, no question. Dr. Atkins was one of the big people, and there were dozens of health sites, natural health sites online.
Okay, I just wasn't familiar with that many of them. I don't remember how I found yours, but I'm glad I did. You've certainly informed millions of people. So I'm excited to get into things. Dr. Mercola, you've devoted a tremendous amount of time and research for many years into the issues we all need to be aware of for our own health. You've been censored by Google, and my institute's been hacked and shut down multiple times. And so, whenever we're talking about the kinds of things we talk about are vaccinations, then we start drawing attention, sometimes not the attention that we want for reasons of sharing and also people trying to censor us. And I know you've been researching the issues of Google and censorship, and that certainly ties into freedom of speech and much more. What I'd love to hear today to start our dialogue is, as you and I talked about, I'd love to hear, some of the key areas that you feel the public needs more awareness with regard to what's really going on due to corporate manipulation of people and society, and issues like 5G and any of the other issues that you feel are really important for people for their general well-being and overall health. So feel free to roll into the topics that you'd like to share.
Well, sure. First of all, when Google first came out, I was deeply appreciated by most of us who were online, because if you were online back then, you might remember that most all the search engines were pretty abysmal, and
Yes.
It was they would show you 10 search results, a very cluttered page full of ads, and then Google had the ultimate simplicity, just a search one box with no ads and really relevant results, which most of the other engines were challenged to find. So it was a real major advance, because the internet has existed. Many people may not be aware of this, since 1968. It's when DARPA first put it online, but most people weren't online back then, because prior to the mid 90s, when the web was developed, World Wide Web, which is a graphical user interface, the way that you communicated on the internet was through a DOS prompt, a command prompt. and it was monochrome, and you basically, I would type things in. You couldn't click on anything. You'd have to type and and type in a command structure to get actions done. So it really didn't take off until the web was invented. And most people didn't understand or appreciate its potential. The very few people did back then. I was one of the early adopters and knew this would be huge and it would change history. And in my view, the internet is the greatest innovation in the history of mankind. And when Google first started, they were great. Everyone loved them. I certainly did. And they were in stark contrast to the giant comparative tech monopoly at the time, which was Microsoft, which was considered perniciously evil, and probably by many, including myself, still today, but not as bad as Google. So, Google was a refreshing alternative, and many people were cheering them on. And in fact, what's interesting is that in the late 90s, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, who are the founders of Google, they were students at Stanford, and they wrote a paper, and that paper was called "How Google is Stealing Your." No, wait, no, that's not the paper they wrote. Well, the reason that paper is important is because they understood and very clearly published, and I can't find the specific reference at this point, but when they published it in the late 90s, that they understood that when an online search engine relies on advertising, they ultimately are going to be serving their advertisers and not their end users.
Yes.
And that's precisely what happened more than a decade later, because initially they weren't doing that. They didn't have any ad revenue. It was kind of like my website initially. I didn't sell anything on my site for 4 or 5 years. There was no model to generate revenue, and I realized that doesn't scale very well. It was really a prescription for financial catastrophe, and or at least shutting it down. So ultimately, you have to have a form of revenue to keep the doors open. So they chose advertising. There's nothing wrong with advertising, but it does make you dependent upon the advertisers, and that's precisely what's happened. And
yeah.
So and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. In June of last year, they had an algorithm that essentially eliminated almost all the major national health websites. I mean, we're just gone from their search engine. And why is this important? Well, it's important because Google is the largest monopoly in the history of the world. They capture, at this point, 92% of all searches done on the internet. It is the term searching on the internet now is called Googling.
Yes.
So pervasive. So, people just don't type in a search engine. Cumulatively, it's 2, 3, 4 orders, 4 times more than all the other search engines combined. So they control it. They're dominant. And when you have this type of dominance and this type of monopoly, it's a threat to the very extension or the very foundation of freedom and health and that we have in our society and democracy and our basic liberties. Because when you have a monopoly, you concentrate wealth and power, and it's really a threat to almost everything that the freedoms that our ancestors fought so valiantly to obtain. So that's what they've done. They've created this massive monopoly, and they did it slowly over time. And they've done a number of things. One is censoring. They also manipulate data, and they're a surveillance company. And this is all done on the premise of optimizing their bottom line revenues. So let me explain how that works. So when we're removed from the search engine, and I mean, we literally are gone. You can type in my name and like the copy and paste the title of an article I wrote, and it still won't come up on the internet.
That's wild.
Not on the internet, on Google search engine, comes up on other search engines, and we'll discuss some of the practical alternatives, because this is what I'm going to share with you is powerful information that very, very few people have. But it's not for the intention of this exclaiming that the sky is falling. There are simple, practical strategies that you can use to protect yourself and your family from this invasion of your privacy and selling your and your family's personal data to third-party customers that are seeking to monopolize on it. So when they censor and remove not only my site but other sites, that means that information isn't displayed, which is a tragedy in itself, not because I've got a big ego and I just really need to be out there. I mean, it was really quite interesting. Our site has been the most visited natural health site and still is, even though we're removed from Google for the last 17 years. But the reason why that's so important is that it gives people an option to understand that there's an alternative to the drug model that is being used to literally essentially fuel the biggest industry in the United States, which is healthcare. We're spending $3.5 trillion a year in healthcare, and we don't really have good results for that type of investments. We are not the leading country in the world with respect to health span or lifespan or disease morbidity, mortalities. We're very far down on the list in almost every health parameter, despite a $3.5 trillion investment. So when these sites are removed, telling people how to get back to the basics and how not to rely on medications and figure out natural strategies that address the foundational causes of disease, our sites are replaced with primarily 3 websites. And you should write these down and check it out for yourself. All you have to do is go to Google and type in a health question, any health question you want. And I would almost guarantee you dimes to dollars that all 3 of these sites will come up, and you won't find any natural health sites at all. None, zero, nada. And most people don't realize that we've disappeared. The average person does not. It's all stealth. So the 3 sites are WebMD, Healthline, one word, and Medical News Today, one word. Now, any idea, Paul, what's the common denominator between all those 3 sites?
Oh, well, the common denominator is they're all going to be giving traditional medical advice and linked to drug companies.
Well, that's part of it, but even more common is that every one of those companies, those websites, are owned by ad agencies. They're all
I didn't know
owned
that.
by ad agencies. Ad agencies that regularly use and monetize Google ads. So, and it's really interesting because when they are discussing a disease, say the treatment of the flu, treatment of coronavirus, they'll discuss it. And in that same article that they're discussing, they will have ads, not only Google ads, but banners and other ads that literally link to drugs for that condition. If you were to do that with a supplement, you would go to jail.
You'd get thrown in jail.
You go to jail. But they do it, and it's illegal to do what they're doing, but they get away with it because they are in bed with the federal regulatory agencies, and they don't penalize them for doing this. So
there's an old saying, he who has the gold rules.
yeah,
And unfortunately,
absolutely.
it's still very true.
Absolutely. So that's the sad reality, and it's part of their overall strategy that is essentially being done to remove this information from the public consciousness. Do you have and this is particularly sad in light of the fact that many people don't know this, and you may not, Paul, that sepsis, that's an overwhelming infection in your body that can kill you. How many people do you think it kills a year?
Probably a hell of a lot.
That is correct. Would you think it'd be as many as 1 in 5 people who died last year died from sepsis?
Well, I wouldn't doubt it, actually. I really wouldn't when you consider
the state of people's microbiome, their immune compromise, fungal infections, bacterial infections, heavy metal poisoning, mercury poisoning. I mean, most people are so terribly disabled. My research has shown that 90% of people worldwide have both a fungal and a parasite infection. And both of those are indications that Mother Nature has deemed you unfit for life, and she's dismantling you to put you back in the ground.
That's right. So the results show that 1 in 5 people die from sepsis. That's particularly tragic because conventional treatment for sepsis are abysmal, and it's almost universally fatal. So you go to the hospital with sepsis, and you're going to rely on conventional medicine, you're going to not make it out alive. This is sad because there are simple natural strategies that don't cost much with virtually no side effects that can cure 80 to 90% of people with sepsis. That would be things, and these are well-established protocol with studies published in the peer-reviewed literature. I mean, dozens and dozens of studies showing this, but they wipe this information away. And these studies typically rely on things like intravenous vitamin C, small dose of hydrocortisone, B vitamins like thiamine, given intravenously, and that seems to resolve this in many cases. Not everyone; it's not 100% effective. Very few things in medicine are, but this really helps quite a bit.
So, it does, but if I could interject, it's still allopathic. It's not addressing the diet and lifestyle factors that led to the problem.
Heck no, but at least you're alive, and then you can address those foundational issues. You can't do anything if you're dead.
No, that's true. But the point I'm making is the same people that go to that usually, when they start feeling better, go right back to the same behaviors that led them into trouble in the first place.
Yes.
And a lot of these, I would be interested to see research on what the recurrence rate of sepsis and related diagnoses are.
Yeah, I would imagine it is high because if you don't address the underlying foundational reasons that caused it, you're going to get in the same problem eventually again. There's no question. So it's not a magic bullet. It's just vitamin C is certainly a natural substance, but used at high doses, especially intravenously, it's a drug. It's a safe drug. Yeah. It turns to peroxide that is very low toxicity and kills these intracellular pathogens, but nevertheless, it still is a drug. So that is part of it now. Now their monopoly on search goes well beyond web search. They've have a dangerous monopoly on online advertising. And you may recall in 2007, Google bought DoubleClick, which already dominated the digital advertising market. So they use this to collect data, and that's entered in health and diagnostic sites, and they share this with hundreds of third parties. And this data is not anonymized, meaning it's tied specifically to you without your knowledge and consent. But when we're talking about that, I think it's important to help people understand how Google is a surveillance tool. Every Google product is surveilling you, not just for a limited time. For the moment you use it, until you're dead, they will permanently store every keystroke, every character you type in their software, and it's stored on their servers, and it's used to track and surveil you. So what are those products? Well, obviously Google search, so they know exactly what you've been searching for. Then they have the most popular web browser, which is Google Chrome. And I found it interesting that your wife, Penny, suggested I use Google Chrome to connect on this podcast. And I said, no, I'm not going to use Google Chrome. I use the alternative, which is Brave. It's the browser that essentially has all the functionality of Chrome, but doesn't violate your privacy.
Yeah, she may not know about that. It was because as you know, we had problems earlier this morning on a podcast using Firefox. So we had to switch to Chrome because Zencastr interfaces with it well, but it's good to know there are other options.
Yes, there are. And we're going to go over what those options are.
Hi, There's a lot of stress on our body, mind, and emotions today with so much electromagnetic pollution, chemicals, and poor quality food. And that doesn't include the stress of finding out that companies like Google, Facebook, and others we thought we could trust are actually harvesting us. There's no better place for overall health and recovery support than certified organic foods and drinks, and Organifi is my first stop for quick, easy to prepare foods and drinks. With all the viral craziness in the world, I can't overstate the value of Organifi's Gold Drink, which is loaded with immune support nutrition. Organifi has many excellent products to share with you. My family, myself, and many of my clients and athletes I coach use them daily, and I know you and your children will benefit greatly from them. Go to Organifi.com, that's Organifi.com, and check out their amazing product line. To get your Living 4D with Paul Chek discount at checkout, use the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 20. To get to know Drew Canoli, the founder of Organifi, listen to my Living 4D with Paul Chek episode 64, Drew Canoli, UBU. I think when you meet the man behind the products, you'll see not only why I love the products, but why I love the values and the mission of the company. Enjoy.
So let me finish the products that Google is surveilling you with. So we've got Google Search, Google Chrome. We've got Android phones.
Yes.
Android is the Google operating system given away for free and virtually in every phone that's not an iPhone. Absolutely capturing your data. No question about it. So this is one of the, and I was a big fan of Android. I had, I think, Samsung Galaxy up until the Note, all of them until like 10 or so. And then this year I switched to last year I switched to the iPhone 11, and no more Android for me, that's for sure. So, so the phone, the browser, the search engine, Gmail, every email you write, every character you type in Gmail is stored permanently on Google servers. Your correspondence is not private, is public. It's just, you have to understand everything you write is essentially exposed to the entire world.
Yes, but it's a pathological manipulation of the concept of freedom of speech.
Yeah, they give it to you for free, but at a price.
Well, my point is, when we freedom of speech means we have the right for people like you and me and everybody else to be found on search engines, including Google, and to share diverse opinions, whether people may agree, whether it be vaccinations or political ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening is they're recording every keystroke,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore it's the freedom of speech concept is being used against us because it's not being used how it was designed by the American Constitution. It's being used to surveil you.
Absolutely. So, all their products, that includes not only Gmail, but Google Docs. So, they have an alternative to Word, which is typically a paid for product, but is definitely worth it. At least Microsoft isn't violating privacy like Google is, at least that we know of. It's not as outright obvious if they are. And then Apple seems to be a lot more secure, and in fact is widely known for their adherence to strict privacy rules. And they're in the news frequently for criminals who have committed crimes and killed people, and they refuse to unlock their phones when the FBI requests them to do it, because they value people's privacy. Google does not do that. They share all their information with the government. Which is really, I know one of your questions is on fascism, and it may sound hyperbolic, but very simply, fascism is defined as cooperation between the corporations and the government. And that's a very simple definition and is absolutely appropriate here because Google is in bed with the government. There's no question about it.
Yeah, one of the things that I found quite shocking when I watched the documentary, The Creepy Line, at Ben Greenfield's recommendation, was that the military's operating systems are bought from or given to, I can't remember either, but they come directly from Google. And it wasn't really explicitly stated, but the same issues with the Android phones they're recording even when they're shut off. And when you turn them back on, they upload everything from videos or whatever to Google's servers. And so when they mentioned in the creepy line that Google was providing the operating systems for the military, I thought, well, God, that is one hell of a dangerous idea.
Yeah. I was the one who told Ben about the creepy line.
Yeah, that's what led me to one of the reasons I reached out to you to talk about these things.
So it's even worse than you think, because you could take the battery when you could take the battery out of your phone, like you could in Samsungs. There's very few phones that you can take batteries out of now, but when you could and turn it off, it doesn't matter. The phone is still recording. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. And when you put the power back on, it uploads all the data wherever you've been. It's a tracking device. It's an active tracking device. And and it's not anonymized. They know who you are, where you've been, and what time you were there. So now you might think, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not doing anything illegal. I never even had a legal thought in my mind. Well, it's still, why should they have that information? Why? I mean, they're just literally destroying your privacy.
And that's only what we know. I've seen many experts saying that the camera is recording, the audio is recording. For example, a good example of that is Alexa. I'll be having a conversation with my family, and all of a sudden Alexa pipes up and starts talking to us or says, "Could you state that more clearly?" or something like that. And that is a good example of a listening device that's always listening, even when you don't ask it to turn on. And so I've told Penny, I want you to get rid of that damn thing. But I have seen experts talking about the fact that the camera can be activated and utilized, or if you film anything, they can get access to it, that the listening function of the phone can be on all the time, even when you think you're not using it, and it can be used against you.
Yeah, and that would include the webcam too on your device. And it depends on what operating system you're using and what browser you're using.
Yeah.
So that is an issue. So you mentioned that you use Alexa. That's an interesting thing. Now, Google has an equivalent called Google Home, which is every bit as pernicious. And another example that there's a surveillance tool. Google has a number of other surveillance tools. And I want to get back to Alexa, but let me just finish their surveillance tools. They bought Google Nest, which is another classic example of what you said. And people know that was the thermometer, the automated thermometer that allows you to seamlessly control the temperature in your home when you're away through your phone, through a Wi-Fi connection. So then they found, after Google bought them, they installed a microphone in that Nest and a camera.
Oh my God! That's blatant, right there. I mean,
they never disclosed it.
Yeah, that's criminal, and that's a thermometer. I mean, that's a temperature regulator. There's no excuse for a microphone and a camera and a device to control your temperature unless they're blatantly spying on you.
Yeah, Google wants the data.
Yeah.
So that you can start to see the level of the pernicious intent. They also have partnered with Ascension Health Systems last year, which is a company that has 150 hospitals in 20 states. And this gave Google access to millions of medical records of patients, millions of records.
That gets to be a problem because when you look at
it's a HIPAA violation on steroids.
It's a what?
A HIPAA violation on steroids.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking of it from another perspective, because if somebody who, there's suggestions out there now, fairly solid, from people like Gabriel Cousins and others, that the coronavirus is manufactured, and they found the AIDS, AIDS virus in it, and all sorts of stuff, that it's a manufactured virus. But when you start getting bioterrorism and corporate manipulation of the public to sell drugs and all this other stuff, if anybody can get a hold of that much information, they can gain access to information that allows them to effectively wipe out massive numbers of the population.
Yeah, I actually interviewed Francis Boyle, who's several PhDs from Harvard and been around for a long time, and really is quite a knowledgeable guy and studied this really carefully. And my interview actually comes out, let me see, like March 6th or so. or 7th on that Sunday. What day is this? It is, I'm sorry, the 8th, March 8th. So anyway, Boyle goes in and discusses how the coronavirus was actually a bioengineered offensive warfare weapon out of the BTSL level 4 facility in Wuhan. So it just escaped the lab. But the only intention of these labs are to create these offensive biowarfare weapons. That's all they do. And this one just escaped. We don't know how it escaped or why it escaped, but that's what it was. So it's clearly bioengineered.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know if it escaped either. There's a history of
you don't know.
Military.
You don't know.
There's a history of the military testing things.
Yeah,
on the
absolutely.
public, and I don't have the specific references because I used to study this years ago. But I remember they were targeting colored people in the San Francisco Bay Area at one point, and that was a military test for biological warfare weapons to see if they could create targeted biological agents. And a lot of the people in the public don't realize our government and our military actually is testing this kind of stuff. And I personally am very skeptical when I hear things like it escaped. I really have a hard time with that because any of those professional laboratories has lots of checks and balances to keep stuff from escaping like that.
Well, they do have them, but it's almost inevitable they're going to fail because to maintain that type of restricted release is very difficult to do biologically. So I mean, even if there wasn't any evil intent on releasing this, it could have, it's just been done by natural violation of the restrictions they had in place. So, and it's not really necessary to imply that type of intent. And the key point is that it was bioengineered. This was not some mutant virus from bat soup, that just escaped into the public. No, this was a bioengineered virus. No question about
it. Yeah, well, at some point, we're all going to have to grow up as human beings and spend the energy and resources we're spending on the military for better social programs, better communication systems, a legitimate political system and government, or something's going to escape that's going to actually destroy us all because we're putting too much intention in defending ourselves from each other, when really we're at a point now where the resources of nature are at a point, and the toxicity and the damage we've done, that if we don't all start working together as a humanity for the support and respect and love of each other and the planet, then we're gonna all die together.
Well, there's probably likely some truth to that, but I think the real threat is the tyranny that we're going towards through companies like Google that are essentially manipulating the whole process. This is a Orwellian dystopia on steroids. There is no question. They're the largest monopoly the world has ever seen. They're siphoning off data every day. They reach deeply into all of our lives. They collect data on every move we make, every conversation we have, whether it's online or in the real world. And you don't have to look too far to see where this can go. This is especially integrated with the exponential explosion of technology. You just look into the social credit system that's already established in China. They have this massive facial recognition system that essentially can identify almost anyone, anywhere. And if you're found jaywalking or you do something that's socially abhorrent, then you're identified and you're actually given a social credit score, and your face and picture is plastered all over on these LED screens. And if you have a low credit score, it will not allow you to buy a house or even travel. You can't travel on a plane. You're restricted to only traveling on a train and at the back of the train and the lowest level section. So they're essentially controlling the population for their ends. And if you're not compliant with what their recommendations are, you're going to be severely punished or maybe even eliminated. And this is happening right now.
Yeah. And there's something interesting I want to share with you as a way of looking at that. I've studied Jungian psychology and psychology for many years because it's an essential part of my system of healing that I teach. And one of the best books on the shadow is by Robert A. Johnson, a famous Jungian analyst, and he makes it very clear that what we call the shadow develops through enculturation. And what's happening here is controlled enculturation, and it leads to repression of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And to the degree you enculturate people and repress freedom, then they have emotional and mental reactions to that kind of control that leads them to having to repress natural means of expressing themselves, which leads to ultimately to some sort of a shadow explosion. If you don't deal with the demons you have inside of you, then you start acting them out unconsciously. So an example of the shadow is simply this: a guy who's not getting along with his wife gets up for breakfast. She doesn't have the eggs ready on time, and so he kicks his dog. Now, the question I have is, what's going to happen when you start forcing enculturation into very narrow boxes, into rules and regulations that are developed by somebody else, i.e. the people that are controlling the software and controlling the enculturation? And all you got to do to have a look at that is look what happens when you tell people called Christians that they have to follow 10 commandments or they're going to burn in hell, and all the violence and all the shadow production and all the sexual repression and the long, long list of other things that comes from that. So what I'm saying is they're playing with a danger far greater than they realize, because controlling human beings beyond a certain point becomes extremely dangerous. And Lao Tzu warned about that a very long time ago.
Sure, absolutely. So they can get away with it if people don't know what they're doing. But I think if, they didn't shut the internet off. The internet still exists. They've just been able to essentially carefully control it. And one of the leaders in identifying how they're doing that is Robert Epstein, who is a psychologist trained at Harvard, actually trained with B.F. Skinner.
And yeah, I remember hearing that in his interview with you. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so it was, he's really well trained in the scientific method. And about 8 years ago, he was shocked, and he's also a computer programmer, so he's really technically literate. And he was shocked when his website was essentially taken down because there was some malicious software, and it was not available on the entire internet. And what he discovered was that Google has other ways of eliminating you from the internet. Even though the internet exists, it can take you out. This is a last resort that they use, but it's definitely one of their tools. If they can, almost every ISP in the world uses Google as their primary source of listing of sites that have malicious software or spam that can hurt you, which is a good function, right? But if they incorrectly identify your site as having spam software when it doesn't, that would essentially knock your site off the internet because no one could reach it. They would just get this message that says, this is a major threat, you cannot proceed. And that got him working. And so he started to understand the power they had. And then he started doing research on their influence and how they were doing it. And it's really fascinating. The Creepy Line is a great movie. If you have Amazon Prime, it's free. You can watch it. It's only 90 minutes. I think it would be well worth your time to watch it.
It's very potent. It's definitely a real eye-opening movie.
Yeah, and then that's the primer. And then if you want to go deep, you can go to my site, Mercola.com, and just type in Robert Epstein, and you will get my 2.5-hour interview with him. So, and that goes deeper, far deeper into what the details are.
Hello, everyone. Did you know that your food can't possibly be better than the soil that it's grown in? This is a fact, and when you consider that only 4 to 6% of the food eaten worldwide is actually real organic food, you'll start to realize why it is that so many people eat and eat and eat, yet show clear signs of nutritional deficiency. In my Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 1 course, which I designed for the public, nutritionist and shaman Angie Check and I teach you amazing things about how the soil really works, what organizations are producing bogus organic certifications, and give you tips for finding real organic foods, And we review excellent research on food and health by Weston A. Price and much more. Everyone I know that's taken this course has loved it. And I've watched people lose a lot of weight, look better, and feel better very fast using the natural, easy to apply methods we share in Holistic Lifestyle Coach Course Level 1. You can get this online now at chekinstitute.com/HLC1online. That's chekinstitute.com/HLC1online. Listeners of Living 4D receive a $100 discount by using the code L4DHLC, no caps, on checkout. That's L4DHLC with no caps on checkout. This is sure to be the best investment you've ever made in yourself or your family. And as always, we'd love your feedback.
One of the things I just wanted to interject there, one of the things that I found shocking is when Robert Epstein in The Creepy Line talked about how they shut his bank accounts off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, we're talking about a company that we think of as a search engine that's got the power to block you from your bank accounts.
Yeah. It's just shocking what a tyranny can do. And that's where we're going towards. It's a really tyrannical control of the culture. And it's getting worse and worse pretty much every day.
Well, it's extremely dangerous. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think we need to expand on that, but I think, it's, as you've pointed out, it's being done in very stealth ways, but that does not deny the fact that we're losing our freedom of speech. We're losing our ability to find natural healthcare mechanisms. We're losing the diversity of public opinion, which is as important as diversity in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you start getting too many people moving in one direction, you start generating a polarity because there's always people that are going to counteract that. That's just how consciousness works. So if you get too many people in one camp, then you have a lot of pressure building on the other side. But if we have diversity, it's almost as though the forces find angular momentum instead of direct momentum. In other words, if your steering wheel works and someone's coming right at you, you can use diversity to get around them. But if you have only one option, you're going to have a head-on collision. And I think that leads to possible, it can lead to a civil war.
Oh, it could. It has potential to do that for sure. Another way that they control the narrative is this issue of transparency, and they've established a supposedly objective third party called NewsGuard. Have you heard of NewsGuard before?
No.
NewsGuard is software that can be installed on your browser that will essentially assign a color-coded like nutrition label to sites like green or red. And they say based on a variety of factors that they assess as to being if it's fake news or not. Well, when you study who this NewsGuard was funded by, it was funded by this company called the Publicis Group, which is essentially an ad agency basically funded by most all the drug companies.
No surprise there.
Yeah, and they don't disclose this. So they use this.
So where's the transparency?
There's no transparency. And that's one of the criteria they use to rate these websites. And yet here you have this company that is funded completely by conflict of interest, these drug companies, and to discredit valid sites. And there's no way to dispute the rating. It's just dictated. They do their analysis, and this is your score. That's it, and you can't dispute it. So obviously, we have a red rating, and you go to our site, and we're warned if you have this software installed in your browser. So that's just another tool they're using.
So for the rest of us, that means you just invert the ratings, and you're probably accurate.
Yeah, I mean, there are some valid sites that truly are fake news and hyperbole and really scam sites. I mean, there's a lot less of them than are truly good sites that have been mislabeled, but still they exist. So there is a need for this type of service. It's just that essentially bastardized and highly prejudiced. So,
Well, what it reminds me of is Quack Watch. And I think it was
sure.
2007 or 2008. I was teaching a class, and one of the students walked in the door and said, "Paul, did you know that you've just made Quack Watch?" And I said, "Well, what is that?" And he told me it was a website that was owned by medical doctors, apparently, that warned the public of who the quacks are. So when I went to my lunch break, I got on, searched it out, and I looked at the names of the people on there, and I believe you were on there.
I've been
And
down there for 20 years.
yeah, and the thing that blew my mind is some of the most famous doctors that ever walked the planet were on there.
Yeah, and the doctor is Stephen Barrett, who's a retired psychiatrist out of Pennsylvania, who has sued many people, including me, for essentially uh, stating the truth, and then he claims if you don't retract that, it's basically as an extortion scam, and he's funded by the drug companies. So if you don't retract your statements on him, then he sues you in court and forces you to
Yeah,
defend yourself, which can typically result in six figures legal fees. So
I know all about it. Believe me, I've already been sued in a situation similar to that. And I won't go into it here just because it'll sidetrack the interview, but I know exactly how they try to bankrupt you so they don't have to compete with you.
yeah. So it's a strategy, and many believe that he's funded by the drug industry because he obviously, as a retired psychiatrist, he doesn't have a large income. And the suits that he's involved in are literally seven figures or more, maybe eight figures,
Yeah.
just to pay legal fees.
Yeah. So he's either laundering money or printing money, or he's
Yeah.
getting hand me downs from people with ulterior motives that he's working for.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes back to, one of the reasons we're doing this. I mentioned earlier that we're spending $3.5 trillion every year on this, on healthcare in the United States. And it's just shocking. In fact, this model doesn't work. One of the, what the most popular drug is out there now?
Probably an anti-inflammatory of some kind or an antibiotic.
No, it's a statin.
Oh, well, that's even worse because it's even more hypocritical, more bullshit.
Yeah, they very rarely ever work. And do you know how much they've earned since they've been introduced?
I can't even imagine.
It's a number that's incomprehensible.
It's probably Google.
No, it's $1 trillion, $1 trillion in profit they made.
Well, not only that, they've brainwashed the public into believing all this stuff. That's what's harder. I mean, I can't even count how many people I've sat in consultation sessions with that are very sick, that are on statin drugs, and I tell them, you need to get off that stuff. It's not good for you, and blah, blah, blah. And they're just arguing with me tooth and nail because they've got the public, and public is entirely brainwashed on many levels, and that's one of them.
And you can't blame the public because these are, think about it. This is $1 trillion. That's enormous, enormous financial resources to manipulate the healthcare professionals who the public relies on for their information. The public doesn't have the education or the training or the time to understand how to evaluate the scientific data. But the physicians should, but are also time constrained. So they rely on these professional groups that make these recommendations. And these are consensus committees typically. And it's not unusual for a consensus committee that supposedly reviews the data objectively and gives a recommendation to have the vast majority, maybe everyone on that committee, have a conflict of interest in getting tens, if not hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars from the drug industry that is essentially manufacturing the drug they're recommending. So they're not stupid. They're making $1 trillion. They got plenty of money to pay with to pay off the key players, the influential leaders on doing this. And it's interesting. There are about 14 or 15,000. One of the ways they do this is through medical journals. And they're just scientific journals. There's maybe 15, 20,000 journals in the world. And have you heard of the term impact rating of a journal?
No.
Yeah, it's a term that refers to its impact on in the scientific community and how important it is. And basically it goes from number 1 all the way down to 15,000 or whatever the last number is. So the number 1 journal is the New England Journal of Medicine. Highest impact rating, even more than Science, Cell, Nature. It's the New England Journal of Medicine. So I don't know how they got that rating, but they do have it. Now, it was an interesting backstory on conflict of interest is that the former editor of the New England Journal, the most prestigious medical journal in the world, was Marcia Angell. And she wrote a book, maybe about 10 years ago now, called The Truth About the Drug Companies and How They Deceive Us and What to Do About It. That is incredibly eye-opening. She was the editor for 2 decades at the New England Journal. So if anyone is going to know about the inside scoop, wouldn't it be an editor there, the chief editor for 2 decades?
Yes, it should be.
At the most prestigious medical journal in the world, journal overall. And her conclusion was, it's simply no longer possible to believe any of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidance, primarily because of the systemic corruption of not only the medical journals, but those who continue to publish what they clearly know is tainted research linked to drug marketing, and of the very doctors who patients trust to look out for us. So these consensus committees, these are absolutely corrupted and conflicted. So once you understand this conflict of interest and you understand how they influence the physicians who then spread the message to the media, and they take it off from there. And then they also control the federal regulatory agencies like the CDC, Center for Disease Control. And one of the former head of the CDC was Julie Gerberding. You ever hear of Julie?
No.
She's a physician. She was there, the head of the CDC, for 7 years. After she left the CDC, guess what company she was hired by?
Probably GlaxoSmithKline or somebody like that.
Very close. GlaxoSmithKline.
Merck.
Good guess, because they are the number 1 manufacturer of vaccines in the world. Merck is number 2. Merck is the correct answer. She went to Merck and made upwards of $30 to $40 million.
A year?
No. This is in a variety of ways, through stock options, and I think her annual salary was $2 million. She would probably getting a few $100,000 a year as a director of the CDC. So, do you think that has any influence on vaccine policy recommendations? Merck is not stupid. They buy the influence of these key influence. They buy them. The key influencers like Gerberding and others. I mean, she's clearly not the only one. She's an egregious example of the pernicious influence of the drug companies. But there are many, many others, probably not many as made as much as she did, but others that have responsible positions to make these recommendations. And then they become widespread and adopted as standard of care within the entire industry. And that's part of the reason why the patients that you are consulting are so confused. You can't blame the patients. I can't blame them. And that was one of the reasons why I went into this, is to reach them directly. But ultimately, they are, and we made a huge difference. You mentioned I've reached millions. It's actually billions of people I've reached. We had more than 1 million visits a day prior to the Google censorship, and they knocked us down by more than half. So you add that up over 20 years, it adds up to billions. So,
absolutely, yes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to short you.
Yeah, I'm not, I'm trying to brag about it, but we did. The point of that I'm trying to make is that we were making a dent. And that's one of the reasons they realized that we were a threat. And quite truthfully, I'm somewhat surprised it took them so long to remove us from the equation, because we are such a threat to their bottom line revenues. My best guess is that we have probably taken tens of billions of dollars from their bottom line.
Well, that's great. And though I do appreciate the statement that you're making that we have to have empathy for the patients and the people of the world because there's $1 trillion being spent to, shall we say, shape
Well,
their opinions.
that was just one drug. One drug.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm leading to something deeper here.
Okay.
All you've got to do is study the history of the education system.
Sure.
Our education system was designed by plantation owners specifically to teach slaves what to think, not how to think, so they would not disrupt mass production. They did not want creative inputs. They wanted people to do exactly what they're told. And that is the basis of our education system today. So worldwide, with the exception of very few, usually private schools that are designed to actually teach people how to think, our entire education is designed to program people into what to think. And all you got to do is follow the money. And you see all sorts of cases of people getting kicked out of their positions, from Fritz Albert Popp to many others, for exposing research that goes against their agenda. And all of a sudden, they're blacklisted and they're gone. But the real issue here is, look, it takes years, in most cases, 10 plus years to develop cancer. You look at yourself every day in the mirror, and it takes a hard work for at least a year to become an obese person. The point I'm making is people need to grow up and start paying attention to their bodies and using their minds to ask bigger and better questions and take it upon themselves to stop worshiping authority figures, which is a pass down from religious control. Priests are now doctors and scientists. Yet people keep doing the same things over and over again. For my entire career of 36 years, I've specialized in medical failures, and I always see a very characteristic pattern. Somebody comes to me, I look through sometimes medical histories 2 inches thick with 3 files. It might take me a week to read through it. And what you see is one neurologist refers to another neurologist, refers to another neurologist, and this can go on for 15 or 20 referrals. And people keep using the same approaches and the same mindset to try to solve a problem, not realizing that you have to think outside of the box and you have to ask bigger questions. And then people say to me, well, that's all that my insurance would cover. Yes, well, now you've spent 5 years getting sicker and sicker. You've had 5 surgeries. You're sicker and broken down than you've ever been. Yet you did not take it upon yourself to find a Mercola website or ask bigger questions or go to a library and search natural health journals. The point is, we're at a point now socially where we have to start thinking for ourselves and using our minds to think holistically and not just believing what people tell us, especially when, as you've highlighted so beautifully, our opinions are being highly shaped and influenced for corporate agenda, not for our own health and freedom. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is people have got to stop exposing themselves to all this socially driven propaganda by corporate intention and say, well, I've done this for a year now and I'm not getting better. I'm getting fatter. I'm getting sicker. I must look for alternative approaches, even if I have to go to a library and start reading books, or they're just going to die. They're going to get sick and they're going to die.
Yeah, many people do. So you can't argue with that. That's obviously true. The problem that I don't think you're really broadening out to is the fact that the reason, my belief is the reason they're failing to do this is that they've been so cleverly and sophisticated, controlled to what their views are and access to information. And we were making headway by the first 20 years of the World Wide Web from 95 to essentially 2015. We had free reign, and that people realized that this was a resource. This was a tool where they could reach out. They could use Google in the early 2000s and get the real truth. Now, we're definitely going to tell you how to do that, but now you can't. They've got captured 92% of the searches on the internet. So anyone seeking to find the truth now, how are they going to find it unless they know how to escape Google?
One of the negative effects of electromagnetic pollution is chronic inflammation in our bodies. It's well known that CBD oil helps reduce pain and inflammation. So I spent a lot of time testing organic producers of CBD and related products and was overjoyed when I found one farm. They are USDA certified and their products are super clean, potent, and highly effective. Of the dozen or more organic marijuana product producers I've tried, One Farm is in a league all their own. Here are just a few benefits of purchasing One Farm products. They handle everything seed to shelf. They are USDA certified organic, top to bottom. Every part of the farming and production process is certified organic. All their products are hand harvested. They do everything by hand. One Farm uses only supercritical CO2 extraction for the highest quality end product. They use small batch extraction to keep products pure. Their products are full spectrum. One Farm includes THC and other cannabinoids to maintain the functional synergy of the plant's healing powers. They have many products available, including CBD oil tinctures. They have doses as low as 3.3 milligrams per serving for pets and a range for humans of 10 milligrams to 40 milligrams per serving in flavors of natural mint, cinnamon, and lemon. They have a water-soluble hemp extract without flavoring that comes in a 20 milligram per serving dose. And this is the first product of theirs that I tried, and I was truly amazed at just the beautiful harmony in it and how it made my body feel and how I could just feel it literally absorbing right under my tongue. They have soft gel edibles at 20 milligrams per serving. They have a turmeric relief cream with turmeric, cayenne, jojoba seed oil, vitamin E, and olive oil, which all work effectively together to reduce inflammation, reduce pain, and decrease stiffness. They have a beautiful lip balm as well. They have some lovely skincare products. They have a CBD day cream with CoQ10, a night cream with marula oil, a beauty serum with rosehip oil, an eye serum with sea buckhorn. They also have a beautiful transdermal cream, which I find excellent for a rash I get when I occasionally eat popcorn because my body doesn't like popcorn. But when I use their transdermal cream, I put a little bit of lavender oil in it and I rub it into the rash. And the next morning, it's pretty much gone. And I've never found a product that effective at alleviating that rash. So if you want to get your 15% discount, go to https://onefarm.com/check. That's https://onefarm.com/check. Once you click on that link, it will automatically give you your 15% discount on all your products. I cannot wait to hear your feedback on these products. Believe me, I tried a lot of them, and there is no competition for One Farm. I think you're going to dig their products. Enjoy.
That's why I said go to a library. For a long time before any search engines existed, I did mountains of research in libraries, and they can't control the libraries very well unless you go to a university library that's owned by a drug company. But you can find the information if you want to. There's a thing called 6 Degrees Separation. It just requires some adult responsibility. And I'm not trying to be hard on people. I love people. I devoted my life to helping people. But I'm saying, if you have a problem, you have a choice. You either keep playing the same game or you think outside of the box.
No question.
And
You got to take responsibility.
We all have to work together to figure out other ways to solve these problems. That's really what this conversation ultimately is about. We're not going to get rid of these major corporations. A few guys like me and you, even with your million hits a day, aren't you're shooting an elephant with a BB gun. Yeah. We have to get together collectively and say, what can we do to stop these things? Just like the Italian people overthrew their government and got rid of their vaccination laws. We can do it.
Totally can do it. We outnumber them enormously. There's this really elite few that are doing all this control. And if we can get the information to the masses, we can totally turn this thing around. No question. And the internet was allowing us to do this, and they realized it was a threat, which is why they changed the game. It's a new game in town, and we need different strategies to inform the public. So there's no question that if you have the motivation and discipline, you can easily find it without the internet. You can go to the library. It's just a lot more difficult and challenging and time consuming, but it's doable. No question.
Well, so is sitting in hospitals and drug lines and doctors' offices. And, this is what I'm saying. Most people are so brainwashed into being a child and externalizing authority. Even when the stuff's not working, they keep doing it. And that is the hero's journey. That is the ordeal that we're all facing. If you think of humanity as a living organism within which each one of us is a cell, that whole organism called man, if you will, is on a hero's journey. And right now it's facing the ordeal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. So one of the ways that part of the reason, there's a number of reasons that it's difficult for these people to do it. In addition to having their access to information cleverly, sophisticatedly manipulated and maneuvered around. But the other things they do themselves, the choices they make in the foods they're eating, the exercise or lack of exercise, the way they're sleeping, but also a stealth influence that we really haven't discussed yet, but you mildly referenced earlier in the conversation, which is your use of Alexa. So
Yeah.
Alexa is a surveillance tool, no question about it. Amazon doesn't appear to be as pernicious as Google, but it definitely is up there. The big three are Amazon, Google, and Facebook. Probably Google, Facebook, Amazon in that order. So Alexa, the reason why you don't want to use Alexa may not be obvious, especially to someone who's listening. But not only is it a surveillance tool, but it doesn't work unless you have Wi-Fi enabled in your house.
Right.
It will not work. So you have to have Wi-Fi. And what most people don't appreciate and understand, and I just wrote the best book ever written on this, is about EMFs. The book is called EMF'd, and clearly it took me over 3 years to write this thing, and it's really a comprehensive description of why EMFs are a problem, how they do their damage, and what you can do to remediate it. But one of the major things is to limit access to your cell phone and seek to eliminate Wi-Fi in your house, which would solve so many of these problems. Nest doesn't work. Google Home, Alexa doesn't work. All these surveillance devices just disappear when you don't have access to the Wi-Fi. Plus, your health improves, your brain function starts to work better. You can seek these alternative approaches that you're recommending people to do more effectively when your brain isn't being constantly assaulted by Wi-Fi signals, which we know impair its functioning. So that's another part of the equation.
Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with Nick Pinot's book, The Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs.
Oh, yeah. He reviewed my book before it was published. But Nick's book prior to my book was the best one out there for the average person. And I recommended it routinely. But I think my job is a little more comprehensive. The job I did is a little more comprehensive, a lot more technical and sophisticated, and has more recommendations from a wide variety of some of the top leading consultants in the U.S. about how to remediate this thing, Nick being one of them, but also guys like Brian Hoyer and Orrin Miller.
Yeah, I think the more we have, the better. I mean, this is an issue that's so broad.
Yeah.
If 100 people wrote books that were, scientifically sound, and we put them on every street corner, we might start getting somewhere.
Yeah. So it's a good tool. And you don't even have to buy the book. I put together chapter 7 is the chapter in the book that goes into recommendations on how to protect yourself and your family from the exposure to these frequencies. And I have created a subdomain on my website, emf.mercola.com, where you can actually download most of that chapter as a PDF and get that without even buying the book.
Well, that's good. That's humanitarian of you. Thank you.
Yeah. So emf.mercola.com. But it's a significant issue and largely a result of another corrupted industry, which is the wireless industry. Every bit as pernicious as tobacco. And just like the cigarette manufacturers did, they followed the example. They contributed knowingly to public harm, and then they lied to the public about it. And I mean, you're old enough to remember the late 90s when you had the CEOs of all the major tobacco companies testifying before Congress that A, cigarette smoking was not addictive, and B, cigarette smoking did not cause lung cancer.
Yeah, I remember all that. I remember seeing the debates on television and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's just sort of it's a tobacco version of Watergate.
Yeah, and technically that's illegal, but it's never really prosecuted. You're not supposed to lie to Congress. And they knew.
No, you're not, but it's happening all the time.
Yeah. So anyway, the wireless industries follow the same example, except they upped the game significantly. They even went so far as to hire the same public relation firms as the tobacco industry did. And it's interesting because in the 1950s, they knew they were in trouble. They knew that the science was coming out to nail them, that this was a dangerous product that they were selling, that they were killing and hurting people. But they got this brilliant strategy that is used today by the wireless industries and many other industries, which is essentially the primary strategy is to create doubt and confusion, to discredit people, reputable scientists who come up with studies and information disputing their claims, to discredit those people, in many cases get them dismissed from their university, and these are not wealthy professors. I mean, they typically can ruin them, and they have to go into gardening or be a farmer because that's their primary source of income. So these are some very brave individuals who come up against these industries and have been devastated because of their courage. So this is one of the ways that they're doing it, and they've also, unlike the tobacco industry, have captured these federal regulatory agencies. Obama appointed this guy named Tom Wheeler as head of the FCC. The FCC is the federal regulatory agency that controls the wireless industry.
Yeah.
Wheeler's former position for like a decade was the chief lobbyist for the wireless industry.
No surprise.
That is the most egregious example of the fox guarding the henhouse. Let's hire a chief lobbyist and make him head of the FCC.
And this is not only in that industry; it's in the drug industry. It's in many industries. I tell people all the time, we no longer have a White House; we have a corporate headquarters.
Yeah. So it's a common strategy, right? And they make it technically illegal, but it doesn't matter. They did the same thing for authors and scientific researchers to declare their conflict of interest when they're submitting papers for publication in peer-reviewed journals, and very few do that. And if they do and they're exposed, there's no damage or no consequences as a result of failing to disclose that. And it's interesting when I go and give a lecture to some of these organizations. I gave one at ACAM last year. I mean, these egregious restrictions are so ludicrous. I couldn't even name the title of my book because it was a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not.
Yet these guys are getting paid hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars sometimes, and fail to disclose it. That's a conflict of interest. Writing a book, exposing the problem is not a conflict of interest.
Yes, and believe it or not, even in exercise and conferences like that, no speaker's allowed to mention their own books because they say you're not supposed to be selling. And I say to them, well, what do you do when you wrote a book or many books that has information that isn't in other books?
Yeah.
Isn't it a paradox that anyone else can reference my book except me, and I'm the guy that wrote the damn thing?
Yeah. It's just an insane safeguard that is just not well thought out, because there's like virtually no profit in publishing a book. I mean, there's a few authors who hit it big, like Harry Potter, those types of books, but those are rare and far between. It's probably only a handful of authors who are hyper successful. Most people don't make that much money from writing a book or publishing it. I mean, it's not a huge source of income. So
yeah, 90% of books published go out of print after the first print run.
Yeah. So it's crazy. I mean, they're not making, and if you buy a book, it's $10, $20, $30. I mean, it's rarely more than that. So it's not making a recommendation to get a drug that's going to cost that much or 3 times that much, and you have to be taken every month for the rest of your life. It's a total difference.
Yeah, could I ask you a few specific questions in regard to what we're talking about here?
Sure.
In your interview with Dr. Epstein and in the documentary, The Creepy Line, Epstein points out that even when people could see the bias he put into his research presentation of websites, it not only didn't shift them, but it had the opposite effect. which, as he said when he was talking to you, was shocking, but it resulted them being even more biased, which I found very paradoxical. I'd love to hear what you think is causing people to respond to information even when they can see the bias. Why are they being even more biased? This almost sounds like the issue of fundamentalist religious people. The more you challenge them, the more convicted they get.
Well, I'm not sure of the underlying psychological principles that explain that, but it's clearly an observation that he had. And I think it's important to actually look at the interview I did with him or watch the creepy line, because he goes into great details on how he constructed the study. It was very carefully done. This was, and I believe he published it too. So, and this was done in conjunction with 2016 election, and he proved that there was millions of votes that Google influenced through these techniques, some of them ephemeral and essentially leaving no paper trail. Examples of these techniques would be ordering of the search engine results. And he conducted these experiments that essentially replicated Google, and except they were able to show the people in the experiment they could control the order of the information they received, and they were asked to. It was really cleverly done, because candidates they gave them to evaluate were actually candidates from a real election, like in New Zealand. So clearly no one in the US would know what the heck's going on in New Zealand. And they actually had real pages from those elections. So they didn't make it up and bias it in any way. It was real data. But they just changed the order of which those pages appeared when they would search. They asked them to search, and they gave them like a specific amount of time to figure things out. And based on the order that the articles came up, it totally changed their opinion. Absolutely controlled it. And what people don't realize is that ordering is an ephemeral. That means it disappears. There's no track, there's no record of it. So Google can implement this strategy and never be accused of doing anything unless someone like Epstein or another researcher actually does this, captures the data, and stores it in servers.
Yeah, which would certainly make him a very dangerous person against them.
Well, he wants to do it. The project would cost like $25-50 million. He just doesn't have the funding to do it. But this is the only way you can show what they're doing and prove it.
Yeah. Now, when I watched the creepy line, and I watched as much of his interview with you as I could, he just said that he was shocked at the fact that when he exposed them to the bias, that they were even more biased in the same direction that they would have been prior to that. And he did not give an explanation as to why that is. He just sort of said he was shocked by it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure there's some underlying psychological principle. I don't know what it is that would support why they're taking that position. But I suspect if they believe it's the case, there's self-reinforcing. I don't know. But it is what he observed, which was really an interesting observation.
Yeah. On the list effect, from my studies of how the unconscious mind functions, I'd propose the reason that the list effect is so powerful of an influence on people is that believing in what's highest on the list is the easiest thing to do and requires less effort to gain more information. And the fact is, research shows consciousness requires a lot of energy and effort to maintain. So what I'm saying is, I think that people take the unconscious route because it becomes habitual, and they think they've got the answers, but they don't actually check, as I said earlier, for opposing opinions to get a holistic viewpoint. I'm just curious if you think maybe that might be the reason the list effect is so powerful.
No, I think it's something related to even simpler explanation, because for most objective data, what is the capital of Nebraska? Nebraska or Florida. You look it up, there's only one answer. And that answer is going to be number one 100% of the time, right? You look it up, That's the answer. So we are trained, classically conditioned and trained over years and years of using the internet, that the first answer is usually right. And then they decrease from there. So we're trained to believe that the higher up that result is in the list, the more likely it is to be true. I think it's a really simple observation based on clinical training over time. And most of the time, this strategy is going to work. But when it comes to subjective evaluations where there's a clear difference of opinion on a topic, you cannot rely on that strategy. It's going to fail on steroids.
Hi, everybody. I'm super excited to tell you about an amazing product from Symbiotica called Synergy B12 with fulvic minerals. This product promotes cardiovascular health, aids detoxification, and enhances cellular energy, and it's unlike any other B12 product out there. And I brought Shervine in to tell us the particulars so you can realize how high-tech, cool, and totally synergistic this is with your body.
Paul, this is the most advanced B12 product available on the open market today. That's final. Nothing even comes close. We used, again, our micelle technology, which guarantees maximum absorption, making these vital nutrients permeable and absorbable, even if you have gut issues. We have both forms of B12 in here, methylcobalamin and adenosylcobalamin. Both are critically important for many, many health factors within the body. We also have extracted fulvic minerals to give it a biocharge. All vitamins need minerals to perpetuate it and to make it absorbable. So it gives it that jing, that energy. We also have L-methylfolate. This is extremely important. A lot of people might have the MTHFR gene mutation and not even know it. This comes in there like a silver bullet and allows your body and gives your body the energy needed to detoxify, cellular energy, power, awareness. All of these things are encapsulated within that micelle delivery system.
That's awesome. Get over to cymbiotика.com and use the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K 15 for your 15% discount, not only on Synergy B12 with fulvic minerals, but on all the amazing Symbiotica products. Can't wait to hear your feedback. I love this stuff, or I wouldn't share it with you. Enjoy.
What do you if you look into your crystal ball and say, okay, if the public doesn't stand up against this thing, what do you think's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years if we just let this disease grow?
Well, it's tyranny. That's the major danger that they're going to have. We're going to lose our personal freedoms. We're continuing to lose them, and we started to lose it because the strategies. I'm sure you're well familiar with it. Is that the government introduces this threat, this perceived threat, and the major one that we know is the 9/11, and then the anthrax fear after that, and then shortly after that they implemented the Patriot Act, which sounds all well and good, but it was a massive loss of personal freedoms and giving the government incredible authority and autonomy to just essentially go in there and do whatever they want.
Yeah, I've actually seen the list that they use in the airports to determine whether or not you can be deemed suspected as a terrorist or a threat. And when I saw the list, it shocked me. It had things like if you are wearing open-toed sandals, if you have a T-shirt, if you have holes in your jeans or holes in your clothes, if you wear your hat backwards, sideways, or any other way than normal, if you do not have a collar on your shirt, like the list of items was a catch net so broad that unless you were a white collar worker with your hair combed back, a clean shaven face, and a suit on, you were a target for potential threat. And as soon as they deem you a potential terrorist, you lose all your freedoms and rights.
Yeah. So that's the biggest risk, I think, is that we're going to that behavior is only going to increase and get worse. And this coronavirus threat is another opportunity to continue to lose our freedoms. And they're doing it in China. They essentially got this new software that almost everyone has to download that essentially gives them the individual who has the software a green, yellow, or red signal. And you cannot move in the community until you have that. And this way they track it and they share the information with the police. So they're just using this as another intrusion to lose your personal freedom and privacy. So I think that's the risk we encounter. And then, one of the things down the line to look at is like mandatory vaccinations, which is
that's a friggin' nightmare right there. I think you and I both know that's clearly evil.
That's what they're moving towards.
Of course they are. Believe me, I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-month-old, and I won't go through it again because in my interview with Sherry Tenpenny, I shared the whole story, but I had one hell of a battle in the hospital when me and Angie would not sign the we would not accept the vaccinations or the vitamin K, and the nurses went crazy. But the long and the short of it is, all of a sudden, on our second day in the hospital, the head nurse shows up with two people in suits and says, Mr. Check, you need to leave the room. We have to have a private interview with your wife. Well, I'm like, what the hell's going on? And she wouldn't tell me. Well, when I came back, Angie told me that was the social services. The head nurse called them to find out if we were fit to be parents because we were refusing vaccination and vitamin K.
Yeah.
They were basically determining whether or not they were going to take my child away.
Well, yeah, not only your child, but your other children too. So that's
well, one of them's 40, so that'd be tough.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the children under 18, of course, but that's the type of risk that we're exposed to, and they're doing this now today, not for vaccines, but for any parent of a child who refuses conventional cancer treatments. They are fit, undeemed parents, and their children will be taken from them by Child and Family Services if they refuse chemotherapy and allow their child to be murdered by the conventional medicine.
It's unfucking believable. That's the only way. That's the most polite way I can say it, and that's exactly why I said to you earlier, people need to pull their head out of their fourth point of contact and use libraries and talk to people like you and me and Ben Greenfield and everybody you can find, because the energy that it takes to protect yourself and get good advice it may be a lot harder than trusting doctors and the internet, but it could not only save your life, but keep you healthy. And the reality of it is we have a real dragon that we're facing here. And if people don't get healthy enough to get involved in this, well, we're going to be in trouble, because the way they've got people drugged and numbed with garbage food and pacifying them with television, we've got a major problem on our hands, because as David Bohm says, real thinking is challenging. That's why most people just rearrange their prejudices. Mm-hmm. And Jung said almost the same thing. And what I'm saying is, to think effectively, you have to be healthy. Your mind cannot be any healthier than your body. That's just a fact. Mm-hmm. So if we don't all start protecting organic farming and work on sustainable corporations and sustainable food and water supplies, and start taking care of Mother Nature and taking care of ourselves and loving and respecting the gift of the human body that takes an entire universe to create, then basically we're going to go into some sort of an open jail system, really a jail with invisible walls.
Yeah. So there's some strategies that everyone listening now can do. So my view of what's possible to prevent that dystopia is to continue to enlighten people about the truth with the strategies you advise, to wake them up, help to wake them up and give them the tools to do that. So usually when people are motivated most is when they're struggling with a health issue. So if they're looking online, they're only finding drug answers, which is now exactly what they're going to do if they're using Google, then they're going to come up negative. And then this is when you have an opportunity to connect with them, whether these are your friends, family, or relatives, and encourage them to use these tools, and so they can figure it out themselves. You can't tell them what to do. You basically have to teach them how to learn, because they have to figure it out themselves. If you give them the answer, it's not going to work. They have to come to the conclusion that that's the answer. It just is. So what's the tools? How do they do it? I hopefully have given enough information, and if I haven't, then you've got to watch the creeping line in my interview with Robert Epstein to convince everyone that Google is a pernicious threat to your life. It needs to be removed from your life as soon as possible. So how do you do that? Would you be interested in finding out?
Would I be interested? Of course. That's why I've got you on this interview.
All right. So, I would recommend, if you have an Android, when your next phone comes up, do not continue with an Android phone. Switch to an iPhone. Along those lines, before I talk about the other alternatives to Google, is that how you take care of your phone is going to have a massive influence on EMF's impact on your body. It's probably your single biggest threat from EMF exposure is your phone. It really should never be put on your body unless it's in airplane mode. And even then, it still should be either off or in a Faraday bag in airplane mode on your body. Because
can I interject real quick?
Yeah.
I find it interesting that people can wear phones on their bodies without noticing. Anytime I wear my phone, I have it on a waist belt. I have a fanny pack, a bum bag that I wear because I got too big of an ass to stick stuff in my back pockets without it just like making my jeans uncomfortable or my clothes uncomfortable.
Much muscles, it's a downside.
Yeah, and so it sits right on top of my right gluteus medius, and within about 10 minutes, the muscle's aching like I've overworked it or it has trigger points in it. And if I hold it in my hand, if I hold it in my left hand, within 5 minutes, it makes my heart and chest start to feel like my whole pericardium's tightening up. And I'm like, how do people walk around holding these phones all day like this?
I'll tell you how. More than likely, sounds like you have a bit of EMF hypersensitivity, which is about 3 to 5% of the population. And I think it's a good thing. Now, if you have a pervasive exposure, it could make you worse, but it gives you an understanding that you have some feedback. Normally, these EMF exposures are invisible. You can't feel, hear, or see them. You're one of the few that can. That's a good thing, I believe. But it can actually be debilitating.
I do too.
It can. A lot of people, maybe 80 million people, have a condition called tinnitus or tinnitus, which is ringing in the ear.
Yeah,
and we believe that's almost always related to EMF exposure. So
I wouldn't doubt it.
If you go into essentially a Faraday cage or an environment where there's no EMF radiation or virtually none, the tinnitus will disappear. It's pretty.
Yeah, it's a good test, but Faraday cages aren't just hanging around, unfortunately.
No, but you can create them in your bedroom. I created one for my own bedroom, and
Would you just use wire mesh?
No, I use wire mesh, a fiber, a product, a fabric that is electrically conductive under the floor. I had to rip off the floor to use shielding paint on all the walls, which required moving cabinets off the walls and taking all the cabinets out of the closet and painting the walls and then putting them back. So and you got to paint the ceiling and put materials over the windows. So one of the keys is to create an environment where you sleep at night with limited radiation, because that's one of the ways that you recover is to really repair and regenerate at night essentially in a Faraday cage with very limited to almost no exposures of EMF. Your body can repair, and then you go out, and then your exposures can be sort of like a hormetic stressor, so it actually makes you stronger. It's somewhat like exercise. But if you're exposed to it 24/7, it's just going to make you worse. You can imagine working out like running a marathon continuously, you'd be dead. So that's an extreme example, but it's somewhat similar. A hormetic stressor can either help you, or if it's excessive, it'll damage you.
Yeah.
So anyway, you got to be really, really careful with your phone. Even if it's an iPhone, you still needs to be in airplane mode. And it should never be on at night. I mean, the worst thing that people do, especially with their kids, is they let their kids have their access to the phones. And many children who are particularly vulnerable because thinner skulls and their brains at important developmental stages, they sleep with their phone on under their pillow. I mean,
that's really bad.
Prescription for brain impairment. It's just devastating. We're not going to have any idea what's going to happen to these kids because, in some ways, EMF exposure is similar to tobacco and cigarettes. Because, in fact, I call cell phones the cigarettes of the 21st century because, like cigarettes, you don't suffer immediately. It typically takes years, if not decades, multiple decades, to develop the biological consequences and the damage that's going to take you out prematurely. So that's what's happening with these kids, I believe. I mean, this is a new experiment. How many people? Not many people. The majority of people did not have cell phones last century. There are some, and virtually no one had it before 1995.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was a small group in 95 to 2000, and most people didn't really have it until this century. And, the bulk occurring when the smartphone started happening with iPhone, which I believe was 2007. So, this is a relatively recent experiment. We're talking less than 2 decades for most people that have had these exposures. So anyway, getting back to what you can do. So iPhone, no Android. No Gmail. No Gmail. It cannot be your primary account. Find another email client. My favorite is Outlook, which is we use Outlook client that we have a server for. Exchange is called, but you can use things like Proton Mail, Proton Proton Mail, and it's totally secure and private and encrypted, and no one can find out anything what you're doing. So get rid of Gmail. You just should not use Chrome. You should not use Chrome. I know it's convenient. It's very clever. It provides really interesting information if you're looking for the weather or football game score or a temperature conversion or something. It does it pretty easily, but you don't want to use it almost any time, especially if you're looking for information. You just simply cannot use Chrome. You're using Chrome, you're committing yourself to a lifetime of ignorance because you will never find the truth anymore in Chrome. When it comes to health, they just are not telling you. It's gone. It does not exist in Google. So that would be, by Chrome, that means no Google search. So you can use another browser like Firefox or Opera and still use Chrome or still use Google search. So don't use Chrome, but don't use Google search, which is probably even more important. So remember, every one of those platforms is going to be surveillance and tracking you and capturing everything you do on that indefinitely. It's stored permanently in their servers. And no Google Docs. So what do you use? The best browser out there, I'm convinced, right now at least, is one called Brave, Brave. It's free. It's based on the same software that Chrome is, which is a platform called Chromium. And actually, Microsoft Edge is switching to Chromium too, and they may have already. I don't recall, but it's a very powerful platform. And the benefit of using Brave is, unlike Chrome, they are private. They are not capturing your data and selling it to third parties. Additionally, Brave has free ad blocking. So I've been using Brave for about a year now, and they blocked more than 1 million ads from my website.
That's awesome.
1 million ads. Yeah. And
have you heard of the browser called Ecosia?
Yeah, I think Brave is a little better. But supposedly, that's an environmental one, as opposed to for global
planting trees. Yeah, I got it because they plant trees now. I haven't taken the time to see if they're really planting them, but it was turned on to me by a friend who suggested it. So
I think you might like Brave better.
Well, I'll try it after I watched the creepy line. I immediately switched over to something non-Google.
Yeah, so use Brave as your browser. So you can still use Google search in Brave. That is, I think, the default search. So definitely use a different one. One that is an option within Brave is called Quant. It's from France, and right now it's okay. We don't know when another company will buy them and change their whole business model, but QUANT. One that I like that I currently use as my default search engine is Swiss Cows, plural, Swiss Cows. And that you would have to have, the benefit of you have to download an extension, and then you can use it, but it's easy to do. And Brave, because it's based on Chromium, I neglected to mention, it's very, very easy to switch over from Chrome to Brave. You can import all your favorites and all your extensions, same extension. So it works just like Chrome, identical. You have all the functionality. Cool. And like today, I'm talking to you on a Brave browser, and the Firefox you had with it previously didn't work, but Brave works. It really is phenomenal. So Swiss Cows and Quant for the search engine, and this is a big one. And I was doing almost everything before I talked to Epstein, but I didn't realize that I was missing out on this one. And that is, you want to function. This one you have to pay for. Everything else I talked about is free. Those are all no charge. But remember, if you're, except for Proton, well, the base Proton Mail is free, but most people, if it's going to be their primary email, they're going to have to pay a little bit more for bigger storage. So, but the other important tool to use that will really anonymize you and keep you away from advertisers. And let me give an example of what this will prevent. I was talking with my girlfriend, and we were discussing a hotel that I was going to stay at when I was visiting my office in South Florida. And literally, she is not has been disciplined as applying these tools. So literally within a few minutes on her Facebook feed, and I'm not on Facebook, but she is, comes up an ad for that same hotel. That same hotel.
Yeah, she's being monitored.
Yeah, everyone. It's not just she. She's not being targeted.
Yeah, no,
Everyone.
I just, yeah, I know that. I'm speaking.
Yeah.
It was a perfect example of exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. So that would never have happened if she was using a VPN, a virtual private network. Now, there are some free ones, but I would think if you're going to use a VPN, you need to pay for it. It's not terribly expensive. It's like $3 a month. You pay $130 and it's good for 3 years. It's like it's almost free. But it essentially guarantees that no one is going to track you ever again if you're using it.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's crazy not to use it. So which one? There's a bunch of them out there. The one that Epstein recommends and the one I use is Norton VPN, Norton. It's like the Norton antivirus. This is Norton VPN.
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming I didn't do my due diligence on this. I'm assuming Robert Epstein did. He likes it. So, but always got to do your due diligence. Maybe Norton changes something and they're selling the data. I don't think so, but right now they seem to be okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
A company like Norton, though, because they make virus stuff, I always wonder if they're in bed with the virus makers,
Yeah, but this has nothing to do with virus. It's just to do with anonymizing your data so no one knows where you're coming from. It's a really pretty clever device and it works pretty seamlessly. You're paying $3 a month, but just to give you an idea of how useful it is, maybe you only need one account for the whole family because it lets you use up to 6 devices at once. So this is a VPN that you want on your phone for sure. Absolutely for sure. Then they will stop tracking you. Okay. So you put.
Can you tell me briefly how a virtual private network functions? Like, what is it actually doing?
It's essentially sending all your data through another server, and it's routing you from a different location than where you're at. And you can, even with Norton, you can pick whatever country in the world you want to be anonymized to. Like I can go to Congo in Africa, or I can go to Mexico or Costa Rica. It can be coming from like Netflix. There are some sites like Netflix that recognize this, and if you cannot use Netflix if you're using a VPN, it won't let you because it tries to protect. Because like literally, Netflix has content that is available only in certain countries, but there are other companies not as big as Netflix, like say BBC is running a movie and it's only available to people in the UK. Well, you can go use your VPN and show that you're coming from London, and you can easily watch the stuff. So it causes the site you're visiting to it's like spoofing your IP address.
Can you use this on phones as well as computers?
100%. Yeah. So you can use it on your phone, and normally you're only using one device at a time. So, if you can easily share it with your spouse. You can put it on 10 devices, each of you, but if you're only using 2 devices at once, it'll work, right? Your phone and your notebook and your desktop. So yeah, it's a great system. It really is. And so when you figure you can use it for more than one person on all these multiple devices, it's a significant bargain. For most of it's less than $1 a month for most devices. So
that's nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I really regret not using it before. So I just started applying the VPN this year. So essentially, I've stealth since 2020.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but Epstein's been stealth for like the last 8 years.
He needs to be with the kind of research he's doing.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. He's just not targeted anymore. It's not that hard to do, once you understand this. So anyway, those are the strategies that you need to do. If you're doing that and you have those tools and share those tools with your friends, get your friends to understand the dangers of Google. So you just can't tell them it's a threat. They have to view the evidence themselves and reach their own conclusions. And I think it's really hard not to come to that conclusion if you watch the creepy line. And most people listening to this, their friends and their relatives have Amazon Prime. And, not to comment on whether that's good or bad, but that's the reality. And it's a free to watch. There's no charge to it. You just watch it, and then you can reach your own conclusion. If you're convinced, then you can implement these strategies to get this workaround from Google, because it is.
I highly recommend watching it. It's an eye-opening documentary. I found it fascinating and shocking.
Yeah, and Jordan Peterson is in there too. So another high-profile guy who really has been vilified by Google and other social media. So
fantastic. Well, Dr. Mercola, this is all very, very interesting, very important information. I'm really glad that we've had a chance to share it with as many people as we can possibly reach through the podcast, and hopefully they'll share it with a lot of people as well, since it's so important, as anyone listening could clearly see. What I asked you in prep for the podcast, some of the most important things you thought people should be aware of for improving their health. One of right at the top of your list was time-restricted eating. Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's one of those strategies that if you do, most likely you're going to implement this strategy. You're going to insulate yourself from so many chronic degenerative diseases. One of the clear observations in longevity research is that calorie restriction seems to be a powerful tool, at least in animal models, to increase longevity. And the problem with it in humans is the compliance is just like really challenging. So a simpler way that seems to achieve most all the same benefits is something called time restricted eating, which is essentially restricting the number of hours that you're eating food.
Yeah.
So most people eat food for over 12 hours. 90% of people eat food for more than 12 hours a day, and probably more than half of people are eating food 16 hours a day. They're eating from the time they get up to the time they go to bed. So the key is to start constricting that down to at least 6 to 8 hours. Probably is a nice start. I personally do a 4-hour window. And the window, now you can, there's some, the key point is to figure out what that range should be at what time it begins and ends. One of the key components is that it needs to be at least 3 hours before you go to sleep. So it would not be very valuable to wake up, not eat breakfast or lunch, and have a big dinner. That would not be a wise strategy.
No, that's too stressful on the organs and glands. They don't get to recover at night.
Yeah. So you want to have at least 3 hours. I typically finish eating at 2, and I'm in bed by 9, so I have like 7 hours before I go to sleep, which gives me plenty of time, because you're still digesting food for at least 3 hours. So you don't want to be digesting food when you're sleeping.
And most physiology texts say 5 if you're eating flesh foods.
Yeah. So I got more than enough time. So, and that's a good simple strategy. And you start slowly and you work your way towards it. And the studies are really clear that even without addressing the quality of the food you're eating, which would not be a wise thing to do. Obviously, you don't want to have processed foods and adulterated fats, and you don't want those foods at all, processed foods. So, but even eating those foods, if you're time restricted eating, you're going to improve your health. I mean, they've done that in animal models. I mean, they give them standard rat chow, which is equivalent to the standard American diet. And the rats that are eating all day long are obese and have degenerative diseases, and the ones that are eating in a restricted window are healthy, even with the same food. So you get better results if you optimize both components, but you still get good results with time restricted eating. So it's a crazy tool. It doesn't cost you anything, probably saves you money. It certainly saves you money, not only in the short time, because you're probably going to eat less calories. You don't have to. You can eat the same amount of calories and maybe even more, but you'll get the metabolic benefits. And what will it be? It'll make you metabolically flexible so that you'll have the ability to transition seamlessly between burning fat as a fuel and glucose. And most people have essentially lost their major ability to metabolize fat as a primary fuel, and they wind up storing it instead of using it, which is tragic because that's a primary reason that contributes to chronic degenerative diseases.
Yeah. A couple of comments I'd like to share in regard to this. One, I had a lot of experience with time restricted eating because I was a competitive boxer. So to keep my weight down, I had to be very, very careful. And there was long periods without food because I could practically smell food and gain weight when I was getting ready for a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you that are young enough and frisky enough to get into a boxing club or any sport where there's weight classes, you'll probably find you're engaging time restricted eating if you just apply the time concept. But it helps motivate you to apply the concept. Have you ever seen the documentary, Dr. Mercola, called "The Science of Fasting"?
I did. I think no, it wasn't. I've got a friend, Doug Orchard, who's I don't know if he did that interview or did that documentary. He may have.
It's an excellent documentary, and the reason I brought it up is because it really helps people understand the concept of time restricted eating, calorie restriction, and the health benefits of it. And I think it's a very well done documentary.
Yeah, I think for most people, though, because I've played with fasting, I've done a lot of fasting before, but I think for many people, it's just too extreme, and you don't necessarily need to do that. And you can get many of the main benefits just by doing time restricted eating. One of the benefits I didn't mention is autophagy, which is a Greek word for meaning self-eating. So it repairs and recycles your damaged intracellular parts and organelles and helps get rid of them. So it's a good.
I do a practice called mini fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And what I call it mini fasting. And basically what I do is typically on a Saturday, that's the most common day I do it because I don't have to work. So I don't have to have a mental load or whatever. When I take Saturdays off, I do it on a day off.
Mm-hmm.
But basically what I do is I just don't eat breakfast or lunch and I fast until dinner time. And then I eat dinner. But I find that when I give myself just the day without breakfast and lunch, it really has a beautiful invigorating effect. I just feel like there's definite benefits, and then you don't have to have kind of the stresses of longer term fasting. And so for those out there that haven't tried that, I really think it's worth trying because it's not hard to do. And I find I feel noticeably better. I find by the time late afternoon comes, I notice increased mental clarity, increased energy. I find things like my training recovery is enhanced relative to when I don't do it. So I think just basically what it boils down to is giving your glands and your organs a break for enough time that they actually get a little rest and you can kind of clear things out of your system.
I think what you're describing is also called OMAD, or 1 meal a day.
Oh yeah, okay. I haven't heard that thing. The other thing I wanted to bring up when it comes to time restricted eating is whenever you're going to go through more than a 4-hour window without eating, for a lot of people, I think because you have to have awareness of what your body's metabolic needs are. You can't be stuck on some rigid diet regimen because, for example, if someone's eating more carbohydrate relative to flesh foods than is ideal for them, it's going to throw their blood sugar all over the place. And they're much more likely to not be able to follow the time restricted eating because their cravings are going to be so intense. Mm-hmm. And so then breathing, I in my 36 years of being a therapist, I've evaluated the breathing patterns of thousands and thousands of people. And I've never seen anybody, even people that have gone to long weekend, 10-day breathing workshops, where they've actually learned how to normalize their breathing pattern. So you get, for example, people who don't have any expansion of the abdominal wall, or what I call an inverted breathing pattern, which relates typically to a history of emotional trauma or childhood abuse and things like that, where when they inhale, they actually tighten their abdominal muscles so that the diaphragm not only can't drop down, but the whole abdominal wall is restricted, which is typically a psychological reaction to a threat. Like if someone's about to punch you, you'll tighten up. Because if your breathing isn't efficient, you basically are losing so much prana and so much life force energy. I find people constantly having to run for quick foods, sweet stuff, and the kind of stuff that feeds parasite and fungal infections. So basically learning to breathe properly and practicing that, I think, is important. And of course, then there's, if you're not getting enough sleep, your blood sugar is much less likely to be stable, and it's going to be a lot harder. If you couple lack of sleep with eating incorrectly for your metabolic needs and a breathing pattern disorder, you're going to have a very hard time applying time-restricted eating, in my observation of these types of issues.
Well, initially, I would think that would be true, but eventually, once you develop metabolic flexibility, then it becomes easier, because the reason that people are having these challenges, in addition to the variables you mentioned, is that they cannot access their fat stores. So you can only store a limited amount of carbohydrates as glycogen in your muscle or liver, primarily your liver,
Yeah.
because you can't really metabolize muscle glycogen for fuel in your tissues. It doesn't work that way. It has to come from the liver. So we either have
Yeah.
liver stores or you have to make it. And you exhaust those stores pretty quickly after 12 hours or so. And when your blood sugar drops low, and if you've lost the ability to easily switch over to fat, then you're going to be miserable. You will absolutely be miserable. You will not have access to energy. You have to have the energy. So it requires a transition phase of either a few days to a few weeks to a few months in some people if they're metabolically injured. But once you make the transition, it's a non-issue. You don't have any of the symptoms you mentioned. I mean, there's no loss of energy. You don't even notice you're transitioning, which is
That's good.
It's just a miracle. There are no cravings. There's no lack of energy. It's miraculous. It's crazy.
That's great. I had a question that I was going to throw in there, but it slipped my mind. So the next thing that you wanted to talk about was NAD and why that's so important to your health. You want to expand on that?
Yeah. NAD is a biological molecule that really is very important for people. It's typically, we've known about it for a long time, like since 1904 was discovered by Sir Arthur Hardin, and it was typically recognized for its role in creation of energy in the mitochondria. But in the late 90s, a geneticist from Harvard, David Sinclair, he was at MIT at the time, found out that it was also useful for powering longevity proteins that are called sirtuins that are really important for increasing your lifespan. And when your NAD levels go down, they don't work well, if at all, because they require that for fuel. And the other component is that NAD is also a fuel for another important enzyme in your body called PARP, which is short for poly-ADP ribose polymerase. And PARP is necessary to facilitate the damage repair process for DNA once it's injured. And you get injured from exposures to ionizing radiation, but also non-ionizing radiation, like your cell phone and your Wi-Fi router. So that's why the book is so important to understand these, because you want to limit your exposure, because one of the ways you can increase NAD is just simply lowering the consumption of NAD by consuming it, because you're having to repair your DNA continuously. So that's a simple strategy. It doesn't cost you anything, because NAD precursors are now available. Things like nicotinamide riboside, nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is NR and NMN. Even NAD itself is a molecules, but these are kind of pricey. They're frequently $100 or more a month, and NAD IVs can cost $1,000 for an IV. So you can do these other strategies for free. So limit your exposure to EMF. You can exercise, and you can do time-restricted eating, both of which increase the enzyme called NAMPT, which is the rate-limiting enzyme for the salvage pathway to reconstitute NAD from its breakdown products and make it up in your body. So you do those things, time-restricted eating. Exercise, as you're a big advocate of, and I'm not going to go into details here. There's a lot. We could talk for 2 hours on exercise easily, and then even then miss so much. But those are strategies that you're not only going to make you healthier, but increase your NAD levels.
What does NAD stand for the listeners?
It's short for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD.
And what are natural sources of that?
Well, the precursors for that, there's several. One would be niacin, or vitamin B3, which is converted through a series of metabolic steps to niacinamide, which is sort of the base structure. There are other precursors like nicotinamide riboside, which is actually present in breast milk, and that can be converted. And then there's an amino acid tryptophan that your body can convert through a pathway, although it doesn't make much. It takes like 70 milligrams of tryptophan to make 1 milligram of NAD, and you need like 9 grams or 9,000 milligrams a day. So it's not a very efficient way to make it. The most efficient way is to reconvert the breakdown product of NAD, which is nicotinamide, back to NAD through this salvage pathway by the recommendation mentioned, which is to exercise and time restricted eating, or even fasting would do it too. But time restricted eating is just a lot simpler.
So my question I'm trying to drive at here is, are there dietary sources that in a person's diet that if they're not getting enough of could lead to problems with NAD, or
Yeah, there's one,
things that we
but typically not in the regular American diet. It's just, as I mentioned, it's just niacin. And in fact,
uh,
because of processed foods in the early 20th century,
yeah.
I'm sure you've heard of pellagra.
No.
Pellagra is a vitamin B3 deficiency that can result in death. It has 4 Ds: dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and then death. And there was a lot of people, you can look it up, just type in pellagra, and a lot of people who died from this because they were eating processed grains and stuff, and that they didn't have enough niacin. So
Okay.
they said it was a niacin deficiency, but the reality was it was an NAD deficiency. These people died because they didn't have enough NAD. They could have easily given them NAD itself or NAD precursors, not niacin, and that would have saved their life too. But ultimately, you just have to get enough niacin. You don't need tons of it. You don't need like 25, 50 milligrams a day. And you don't necessarily need to take a supplement. If you're having any type of balanced food, you're going to get that much niacin. And if you don't know if you're getting enough, you can use a nutrient tracker like Chronometer, CRONOMETR.com, which is free online. And you can just type in your food and it'll tell you how much niacin you're getting in your food and all your other nutrients too.
So really the bottom line is, if you're eating an organic whole food diet,
Yeah,
then you probably won't have a problem in this regard.
absolutely. And let me just see. Yeah, like I'm looking at my diet for today that I ate. I had 20 milligrams of niacin, which is, I guess the RDA is like maybe 15 or 20 milligrams because I was 120%. That's with no supplements, 120.
Yeah. Yeah, the one of the problem with all those tracking devices is that they're all based on an assumption that all foods have the same levels of nutrients in it, which is a very dangerous assumption.
Yeah, yeah. No, and then even worse than that, I'm thinking confusing it with Fitbit. Actually, I forgot to mention Fitbit with Google. Fitbit is another tracking device that Google purchased for almost $3 billion late last year. It's also tracking you, but there is another nutrient tracker I used to use, and I forgot the name right now. But anyway, it's a common one, and they use crowdsourced data. So you or I or anyone can put in a food, name it, and then put the nutrients as data in there, and it's not validated. It could be anything. It could be mishmash data. So it's not. It's even worse than that. So so the Chronometer uses reference data, but it is correct. There is a wide variety in the nutrient densities of different foods and the qualities of foods and where they're grown, but it at least gets you in the ballpark, and it'll know if you're really far off or not. So I think it's pretty close and reliable. It's helped me a lot figuring out things like omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, zinc to copper, calcium levels, things like that. Certainly calories, how much saturated fat you have, and monos and omega-6s. So.
Well, we've had a great discussion. We've covered a lot of really interesting and important concepts today. I'm very grateful that you shared your time with all of us, Dr. Mercola. Is there a specific website? It was great that you have the book on EMFs coming out. Is there a specific place to get that, or where would you like to direct people, or is it just your favorite place to send them, Mercola.com?
Well, you can go to emf.mercola.com and you can download the free chapter there on how to remediate against EMF. And there's like 25 pages and really enlighten you as to what you can do and help quite a bit for that. And that will subscribe you to my website too, where you can get, their daily newsletter that has loads of free information, like two articles or so a day that really enlightens you as to exactly what's going on, the current threats, coronavirus, and what you can do, and things like sepsis, and simple strategies you can take to protect yourself from monopoly threats like Google.
Yeah, great. And anything else that you'd like to share or direct people to before we close?
Well, my favorite supplement, just briefly, is molecular hydrogen, which is a gas, and it's a powerful upregulator of a pathway called NRF2, which is basically a selective antioxidant that causes your body to make its own antioxidants, things like catalase and glutathione and superoxide dismutase and about hundreds of other antioxidants when they're needed. So a lot of people take antioxidants like vitamin C or vitamin E and think, "Oh, this is great because I'm, have that oxidative stress." Well, that could be highly counterproductive because your body has beneficial free radicals like nitric oxide, and if you take high doses of antioxidants indiscriminately, it could interfere with this production and interfere with these important biological signaling molecules. So it's far better to have let your body do the judgment. And that's what molecular hydrogen does. It only activates this NRF2 pathway if there's excessive oxidative stress. So there's a feedback loop involved, and you don't unnecessarily suppress beneficial free radicals. So really powerful to protect against damage from things like excessive oxidative stress from EMFs. So
What's the name of it again?
Molecular hydrogen.
And where do you get it?
Well, we've got it on our site. It is a tablet. There's a number of different ways you can get it. It's a gas. You can breathe it in, but that's really inconvenient, kind of expensive. But there's tablets that have essentially metallic magnesium that when they're put into a glass of water but they create these nanobubbles that have the pressure that allows high concentrations of molecular hydrogen gas to go in that you have to consume with as soon as the tablet dissolves. It takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes or so. And that will not only give you molecular hydrogen and stimulate the NRF2 pathway and these endogenous antioxidants, but also give you, for every tablet, like 90 milligrams of ionic elemental magnesium, which is almost everyone is deficient in. So it's an extraordinary useful supplement for magnesium, which also interestingly helps for EMF because there's some speculation that activating calcium channels is partially responsible for some of the damage that it does. And magnesium, we know, is a natural calcium channel blocker. So it's like a win-win with molecular hydrogen tablets.
How much is a bottle of it, and how long does it last?
It's not very expensive. It depends on how much you use it. I like to use it when I travel. So you typically only have to. You don't use this like every hour. I use it like once a day. I typically take 2 tablets as soon as I get up. It takes like a half hour to work. So if you're going to be going in, I use it also for hyperbaric oxygen chambers where there's some oxidative stress. So half hour before you go in the chamber, or half hour before you work out, or you have this exposure, or when you're probably using it more frequently when you're flying, because there you not only have the non-ionizing Wi-Fi radiation, but you also have ionizing radiation from the gamma rays at 35,000 feet. So,
right.
It's a really useful tool. Ben takes it. He definitely takes it all the time. He takes it like every 2 hours when he's flying. I think it's a good strategy. That takes like two every 2 hours, I think.
How much did you say it is a bottle?
It's under $50. Might be $30. I don't know. I just.
So if you take 2,
it might. It's. I can look it up. I just don't know.
I was just curious, just so people listening could know what the investment would be.
Yeah, it's not terribly expensive. And molecular hydrogen. I'll find out in a moment. Let's see. But it is my absolute favorite supplement. I just think it because it's just tough. Okay, a 30-day supply, which would be 1 bottle. This is how much? Let's see. I was pulling it up. Okay, here it is. Okay, now where is molecular hydrogen? Why didn't it come? Oh, here it is. Oh, it's $20.
Oh, that's not bad. And how many caps in a bottle?
30. Yeah.
Okay, so 2 a day. It's
2. Well, you can do 1 a day. I mean, you don't necessarily need 2. I do 2, and then you get a bigger 90-day bottle for $50, which is 90 pills. So it's like the price goes down.
That's pretty reasonable. It's worth testing. I'll buy a bottle and see how I feel on it.
It's not terribly expensive, and it's just phenomenal. And you may want to interview as a guest Tyler the Baron, who's really an athletic stud. Ben has interviewed him before. He's the director of the molecular Molecular Hydrogen Institute. And
Okay.
really a wealth of information. He's getting his PhD in molecular hydrogen, and really profoundly literate molecular biologist, and understands a great chemist, a biochemist too. So he can discuss the pathways in great detail and with great precision and accuracy. So I just interviewed him a few weeks ago again, and I've known him for 6 or 7 years. This is a guy who is like early 30s, Paul. He can do deadlift, I think 450 pounds, and which is not necessarily impressive. I know people who can double deadlift, but he can do a
You're
he can do a 217
talking to
marathon.
a guy that's almost 60 that can deadlift that much.
I'm sorry?
I said, I'm almost 60 and I can deadlift that much.
I know, but he can run a 217 marathon.
Well, if I was getting paid to run marathons, I'd do that too. But it's good to know that he's healthy and fit. I think that's the most important.
Yeah. I mean, trying to impress someone with physical characteristics is probably a mistake talking to Paul Check, but
Well, it's all good. I'm just glad he's healthy and he's living, holistically, or at
he
least,
is.
fitness is important.
Yeah, I just don't know many people who are healthier than he is. So, and he's really
That's cool.
smart, really smart.
We love it. We need healthy, smart people, lots of them.
Yeah, for sure.
And fortunately, Ben Greenfield has kids, so we know there's a couple more, and I got some kids that'll be out there.
Yes,
doing their part, and all Czech professionals are out there too, and they're really into it, man. There's almost 15,000 of them.
Thank you so much for creating that educational intervention to have coaches out there that understand the truth, that can really teach people, because that's what we need, people in the trenches. I'm not in trenches anymore, but we need people out there, and you've done a great service by facilitating that resource.
Thank you. Where are you located now?
I'm in Florida.
Okay.
I pretty much get the chance to walk on the beach almost every day with just shorts, and in the ocean I'm grounding, and most of the time, certainly the late spring up until December or so, I'm in the ocean every day. So
awesome. Weren't you in Chicago years ago?
Used to be.
Yeah, because I remember having a chat with you at some point, and you and your girlfriend at the time, and you were in Chicago then, but at least you're getting some sun, and
yeah, a lot of.
I'm glad you're staying healthy. We need to keep you healthy for a while, man. We got work to do.
I know, lots of it. So yeah, I haven't hit Act 2 yet, so I'm getting ready for Act 2.
All right. Well, hey, it's been a very interesting conversation. I always know that talking to you is going to open up many books and concepts and inroads and opportunities for discussion. So I look forward to whenever we can make it work and we have something to share. I'll love to have you back on the podcast with me.
Well, thanks, Paul. Good being with you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Mercola, and blessings for all the great work you're doing.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Check and today's guest, Dr. Joseph Mercola. You can visit his website at mercola.com, and it's filled with articles, videos, recipes, recommended products, and much more. Grab your copy of Dr. Mercola's latest book, EMF'd, at emf.mercola.com. You can also get a free report on blood flow restriction training at bfr.mercola.com. Follow Paul on Instagram and Twitter at Living4D Podcast, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/Living4D with Paul Check. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulchecksblog.com and at the Czech Institute's new streaming media site, Czechiva.com.